got my next question is for Claudia. Claudia, you spent years dealing with uncertainty in health information. What lessons from health communication, especially during COVID, can transfer to how we handle uncertainty in news and politics?
Thank you. Well, there are many parallels, obviously, between these, and we see health information in politics now. We see a lot of politics with what's happening in the United States right now with the current Minister for Health, who is clearly a conspiracy theorist and is pumping out quite a lot of garbage. On the same time as doing some work which is fairly well-meaning and well-founded, such as nutrition support, for example. So this can create challenges. Health is a central part of our society. During COVID, we saw how lockdowns were politicized. We saw how misinformation about vaccination was spread, fear and anxiety. So it's, and we also see the relationship between some of these health-related issues, as I've touched on already, and political partisanship. So falling in one camp or another of health, which should be clear, scientific, evidence-based, and is in most cases, but it gets loaded with all sorts of other things and turned into a partisan political issue, and then the fights go out. And no wonder the public has become concerned and confused by this. But there have been a number of initiatives underway, including one by the WHO, which I was part of, which was looking at the infodemic, they called it, and trying to find out ways to spot these problems and mitigate against them and correct them where there was problems. But some key messages that have come out of that and other work that are relevant for both areas. For example, the first one will be that silence and mixed messaging can create a breeding ground for suspicion and conspiracy theories. So we saw what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone was like, what the hell is this? We don't actually know what kind of disease this is. It looks like this. So we think we're going to take these measures. Actually, it turned out to be spread in a different way to what they thought was at the beginning. But they were taking immediate action based on another theory, but they weren't really sharing with the public their own uncertainty, because the feeling was you want to maintain a sort of image of being aware and knowledgeable and in control, and we've got this, everybody. The truth was, it was a learning process for everyone. And I think there's that message around that is that you have to be honest and open at the beginning. You have to take people with you. There are obviously some advantages to strong leadership, but we also have to be honest about where areas are equivocal. Because without those things, you get, it's great opportunities that, well, I've used my ends in my notes here, the misguided, malign, mendacious, or politically and financially motivated to use that disorder for their own gain. And we've seen that with political actors as well. And another thing is that we've seen with the COVID crisis, and we see it in the politics of social media every day, is that cognitive biases predispose us to see what we want to be true as more valid than the things which we would rather weren't true, uncomfortable truths, or simply opinions of people that we don't like. So that is built into the point that it can really set us up to fail, and this is why some of the programs such as the one you're developing will be much more useful. And naturally, social human behaviour is being hacked in these circumstances too. So we trust our families. We trust people like us. That has proven to be useful throughout history because, you have reciprocal relationships. And if you tell a lie, someone's going to call you out, and your family's not going to lie to you unless it's a toxic family. So we do that. That was hacked in the COVID crisis, and we did some research on this at the time. Because we found that videos on social media that were false around vaccine harms and lockdowns and other things were being spread by family members, often international diaspora, and those were more influential than the public health messaging. And I think you'll see the same in some of the political narratives that we're seeing. So you really need to invest beforehand in building trust in institutions, because without that, you can't suddenly say, oh, hi, we trust us now. You have to build that through collaboration and earned trust. And you need to develop a culture of critical thinking and pro-scientific thinking. And that, again, is why doing your own experiments can be useful. And so there's other things I could say, but I will stop there because I said quite a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question is for Walid. So very timely, you're right next to this. It's as if you knew the order, and you predicted it very well. Walid, you've worked on social media data at scale. What's one structural change to how platforms are built that could make truth seeking? And Elon have best of the way through it, and I always try to pick it up my spiels, but truth seeking easier.
That's a good question, actually. So it's changing. So the way we have been getting information, our generations, is different than the new generations. So we were using like newspapers, news media as a source. Now it's mainly social media for the new generation, Gen Z, and so on. So, and in social media, everyone can share news. And this is actually the problem now, that the way verification of this stuff becomes much, much harder. Because anyone can see anything, and he can go back and tweet anything, or post anything, and it goes viral. Because some people like it, and at the end, you don't know what is true or not. And the changes that I noticed in the last just 3-4 years, especially for the previously we were saying the new source of news was Twitter, because it has been actually came out as this is actually the main thing for it. And then in the last couple of years it has been like everyone knows the most product. And even the access of the tweets changed a lot for us, even affecting our research, because we don't get data anymore. Previously it was there is APIs that can use and get all of data. And the problem now, we cannot even do big analysis that we were doing before with this kind of algorithms happening there. Elon Musk even, this was an interesting tweet when someone came to Grok when he came out recently in fact last February, and actually asked it, analyze the last 1,000 tweets of Elon Musk and check actually the misinformation there. And it said actually that, and this was Grok at that time, 48% of the tweets are truth. 30%, 22% are clear lies, and 30% are like I said, you cannot say it's not actually a lie, but still it's not the full truth. And this is the probably most influential person we are looking at, and he's controlling one of the most influential platforms for actually spreading news. And even he tweeted this morning that he is actually doubting that the elections in New York City was actually truthful. So if we don't have control of these people, and we'll never have control of these people because money controls. We have to be. So we have to be actually promote more critical thinking. When you see something, you have actually to see different sources. This is a very exciting platform you are building, because it's not always lies. Sometimes there is misinformation, there is disinformation, there is no information. You hide some information, you put part of the truth, but not the whole story. You actually, and this is actually what people are realizing in the last few years. From actually the trust we were talking about, people started to lose trust in many international institutes. And we have been, because of the contradictions, double standards, happening around us. And this has actually became a very challenging task. And now with AI generating whatever you want, it becomes even harder and harder. So how do we face this? I don't have a clear answer. We keep analyzing it, we keep understanding what is going on, but the challenges is increasing because the counter algorithms are still improving as well.
Thank you. My next question is for Björn. You've really predicted this very well.
As only one person that knows the question, so that was the easy one to predict.
Your rate shows that people think others, your rate shows that what people think others believe can change whether they see them in fast speeds that can let a large minority set the mood and nudge the rest of them to stay quiet. In a prediction setting, forecasting setting like Cauldron, where we want honest priors, what's one counterintuitive way this dynamic can skew the crowd, and one simple interface choice that will surface the real spread of views without silencing anyone? This might be a bit of a weird question.
It's a really good question. I should say, for transparency, I really like Cauldron. I've been using it for months. I just checked out like number 7 on the leaderboard. Yeah, there's one thing I really like about it, and that's you don't get to see what other people have predicted on the same question before. So, right, for everyone who hasn't used it, you get asked this question, like, do you think Trump's still going to be in office in 2 years? Do you think the income tax will rise in this, right, yes or no? And you have to make a prediction before seeing what everyone else has said on this other thing. And once you've made a prediction, you can then go back and see what other people have said and why they've said it, because you get incentivized for the reason. But because you don't get to see what other people have said, you're forced to make your own prediction first. You're not going to be influenced by everyone else. You get to explore the news on your own, in your own time, and whether it takes a minute or 5 or 10 or however long you want to spend on it, you then make your prediction, and then you go and see. And I think it'd be really interesting for us to look at when people have made their prediction, and then they see what everyone else has thought, and then maybe they realize, okay, they're the minority, everyone else has said the other thing. How often do they go back and change their mind? And when they go back and change their mind, do they tend to be right or wrong? Because I think actually that when you allow your opinion to be changed, just because everyone else has said something different, then maybe it doesn't always mean you're actually right. So it's that kind of herd mentality that might lead to everyone says the same thing, but that doesn't mean they're right. So I really like that at the moment. You're not showing people what everyone else has thought. And looking into that kind of data, what does that tell us about prediction accuracy? It would be a really interesting thing for us to do.
We've actually seen on Walid sometimes people come and change their predictions as things develop. So they may have predicted no 2 weeks, a month ago, and something's changed. So they go on, they come log back in and they change their prediction. And so to get it right, they read something on news, maybe that was not done on full aggregate of if they've been right 95% of the time the prediction, the aggregate's been right, the majority has been right. That's been interesting. And they can't, I don't know if it's because they want to be up on the leaderboard or they want to win bad reputation that they state on their prediction that incentivizes them to go back, follow the stories, become part of the story in a way and change their prediction.
That's interesting, because you sign up, you presented this question about something you've maybe never even thought about, then you go off and read some news about it, and then suddenly it becomes part of the list of things you care about, and now you've invested in it, because you've staked some of your reputation on it. Yeah. So now every time you read something about it in the news, you go and think, oh wait, actually should I change my prediction or not?
That personal investment, I think, is critical.
Is that relevant for belief revision and changing your mind about things?
And the attention to detail, the value you then.
Interesting.
I think entrenchment is quite an important thing because the risk that we see, obviously, if due to conformity pressures, people will tend to often, if you're quite weaker, but actually everybody's quite weak. You will often look at what's the popular opinion and then go hell for leather with that. And you realise there might be social incentives for you saying that. We've seen it over the Palestine debate recently, to the point where you're getting young people with very little information pretty much advocating terrorism because they think that's the moral thing to do, because that's the right thing, because we're all doing it, without actually unpeeling the layers of what they're actually saying and having a much more nuanced sort of point of view.
And so I think with all of these, with these platforms, reflecting back what the majority says is important, and actually looking at whether you change your point of view, then ensuring that that's not that is an informative and enriching thing rather than a call to conform is probably the challenge there.
Thank you. Actually, I have another question for you. How should we think about truth, the way truth, when everyone, even experts, can disagree? Is the goal to agree, or is it to reason transparently?
Well, truth is to some extent a subjective concept. It's measured by evidence of whether something is the way you think it is, but also by knowledge and opinion of what is regarded to be the way of the world or the way something is. Now, the key here is to aim for rationality. So I talked about conformity already, not simply saying it's true, because somebody said it on social media. There's a very good infectious disease doctor I follow on Twitter, X, one of the last remaining actual useful and interesting people on there. To be honest, the cute cat and dog videos are the most interesting part of those platforms now, whereas it used to be a really useful academic resource. Anyway, this guy's on it, and it was rightfully saying that, these calling out these people that are advocating for some, the truth is held by this guy with no scientific knowledge in his basement, in his underpants, in his mum's house. Whereas this doctor, who studied it for 30 years, is supported by science, all the rest, is being accused of being conspiracy theories. So those comparisons, it can be more attractive to listen to the guy in the basement. And this is the problem. Now, I think the trouble is with truth is that many issues, often political issues, are subjective and they're codependent, their truthfulness is codependent on lots of other things also being true, or circumstances changing. So seeing both sides of a debate and being able to shift your views or look at different points of view or argue about things is healthy. It's normal, it helps us to reach a conclusion based on recent debate and analysis of different sides. So that is good. But other things are much less equivocal and much more sort of solid, like the car safety, for example, or other forms of safety. Many of these things are loaded with risk. Either you use seat belts, you're less likely to die in a car accident. Now, there's a long time when people were claiming that was all just made up, they were just going to sell these products. But the fact of the matter is it's an evidence-based claim, and it's continued to be evidence-based by, obviously, the evidence of people dying if they haven't worn a seatbelt. And the same thing's true in a lot of medicine, although medicine, by its nature, and that's science in general, the whole, I'm sure you'll be aware, the whole sort of philosophy behind science is the one put forward by Karl Popper, that it must be disprovable, and therefore facts in science are only provisional facts. They're facts as long as the evidence stacks up, but your facts may need to change, just as your theories in physics may need to change and have done with these great transformations. So, and actually saying, well, that's true and that's not true, it's not 100%, but by the balance of probabilities, if something is being explained to you by an expert or a group of experts with a consensus of experts and evidence around them, it's more likely to be true by all rational measures. Now, what we see is bad actors actually using these things to see signs of conspiracy. So if you're an expert, even things might go to be experts anymore, if you're an expert, or if you work for the BBC, which is supposed to be, is actually a very impartial service, balance, or if you work for the NIH, you're a bad person who must be abusing children in pizza parlors. It gets to that ridiculous point that they kind of use the identity and the indicators of trustworthiness and weapons. And that is what we really
AI is revolutionary or evolutionary, from your perspective, how do you see AI changing? Not just how we get information, but how we form opinions. And if you were to suggest something, what cultural or educational evolution do you think we need next to cope with information overload responsibly? So we can solve all the problems just like in the next half an hour.
Okay, and I don't to solve those problems. So I gave a talk with that title about is AI evolutionary or revolutionary earlier this year at EFI for a digital societies conference, which is not my usual audience, I must say, but it was very, very interesting nevertheless. And my answer was actually, I sat on the fence. No, it did not quite that I sat on the fence. What I wanted to remind them was that the scientific development of AI has been evolutionary in the sense that we've been doing it here in Edinburgh for over 60 years. AI did not start with ChatGPT or even with transformers in sort of just over a decade ago. AI has been developing since early 60s, and so here in Edinburgh we've had a department doing AI since 1963. So we are seeing the benefits of a lot of work and engineering and development. It's not just sort of sprung up and created by itself, which is almost how you would believe from some of the things that are said in the media. So from a scientific point of view, it's an evolution, as science always is, as Claudia said. We make steps forward, sometimes we go back, and we build a wall of science, if you like, and everyone puts their own brick in, or sometimes I have a nice image when I'm doing it all, which actually a dry stone wall, and then it's got religion all over it, and actually most of us are just making religion rather than actually putting bricks on top. But if we look at AI from the other point of view, from that point of view of society, then yes, it's been revolutionary, because all that evolution was happening largely in academia, somewhat in companies, but people were unaware that it was there. And then that has burst into public perception really just in the last 5 years. And so it has made major changes, particularly in how people access information and the trustworthiness of the information that they're getting. So there's been a lot of concern about safety, and we still haven't cracked that. How do we put in guardrails to try and ensure that things are correct? How do we get rid of hallucinations? How do we remove biases? Well, they're already there in the data because society is biased. So I think that's it's not something I say that I feel particularly equipped to say how we improve that. And these guys all work on those areas, I don't. But I would say that we need to develop better education for people who are dealing with uncertainty and ambiguousness. So I think when I was at school, we were taught facts, and everything the teacher said was true, and it was very much about accumulating your knowledge. And I think on all levels of life now, there is much more uncertainty. As a person who develops probabilistic models, I know that people are terribly bad at measuring uncertainty and making predictions of how different probabilities can influence each other and what the outcome is. So I would like to see all school children taught better probabilistic reasoning and understanding of uncertainty and those things, because it would give them that broader appreciation of that small probabilities sometimes can have big impacts. Small probabilities sometimes just become negligible. By playing with models and understanding those things, people will start to understand why that is, how those situations
Well, sorted. Sorted.
I mean, it's just part of our armory, I guess. And, we have to equip ourselves with tools to counteract the effect.
Speaking of tools to counteract the effect, the next question is very timely. What does being well-informed really mean today? Is it having more information or is it having better filters? This is for Walid.
Sorry, whether
what does being well-informed really mean today?
well-informed actually mean? Yeah, well, I would certainly agree entirely that my background as well as being psychology is actually in statistics and things, probability and uncertainty and things. It needs to be a fundamental thing to understand. A lot of misinformation isn't so much about trying to change your mind, but sort of, add doubt, cause people to pause, confuse things a little bit, play around with the chances. Some of these things that we're certain, there's that little element of uncertainty, and it's feeding that sort of thing as well. As far as sort of well-informed decisions, I guess it's not so much a case of sort of quality over quantity, or rather it is, in that well-informed means being in a position to make a decision with accurate premises and minimal ambiguity. So again, ambiguity, probability, working out the levels of certainty in your response. So I was going to say actually it's important to have minimal uncertainty, but really it's about understanding the level of risk rather than actually eliminating it. So it's okay to do something risky if you understand it is risky. Okay? So it's, being informed is being risk aware, I suppose. Generally, though, some sort of investment that is, looks too good to be true will be too good to be true, i.e. false. Okay? So you want to be able to identify when you have a sufficient quality of reliable, consistent information, and combine that with a good personal sense of probabilistic reasoning. Find your decision threshold, or at least be aware of when you don't reach it. Do you have enough information to give a reliable response? Recognize unknown unknowns and what are known unknowns. Again, just even being aware of where your holes are when you're not entirely confident about something, or rather when somebody else isn't entirely confident about it as well. Computers in my early days used to declare this sort of insufficient data error. Now they just hallucinate things up. And so again, be wary of that sort of thing.
To add on to that question, how, and this is for all of you, how much you model, we're talking a lot about probabilistic thinking, but how do you model it in a way it's accessible to the end user? I don't think people like thinking in numbers, and it's a 90% chance this might happen, or 10% chance it might not happen.
People do like simple number, but that's not how the world works, basically. So again, for those who are statisticians or something, it's not just the measure of central tendency, something like the average, turn everything into a single number, but the measures of dispersion, the sort of spread of it as well, the range distributions. Yes, it's not you will have 3 months to live, but actually, there's a range there. It's not a single number. How to present that? Should you use dashboards? Use amber traffic lights? There's a whole range of things. Yeah, no single good or useful answer.
You've both spoken about probabilistic reasoning and how people should be doing that. And as you were saying that, it actually occurred to me that it's basically what Cauldron is also encouraging. Now, it may sound a bit like I'm working for Cauldron here, I'm constantly advertising. I promise I'm not. Anyway, but so the way it works, right, is you sign up and you predict, and you get this reputation every time you sign in. So you get like 50 or 100, or you start with 1,000, and that's your currency, right? So if you want to predict 50 of your reputation that Donald Trump will still will be re-elected as US president in the next elections, even though he's on his second term, so he should be. They have to change the constitution or whatever. You can predict 50, or you can predict 500, and it shows you, well, if you get it right, if you stake 50, and if you get it right, you get 100 back. So you can decide for yourself, do I think, how badly do I want this 100 that I win if I wage 50 of my reputation? And is it worth it? Is it likely enough to happen that it's worth it? And maybe it's not likely enough to happen that it's worth it. Maybe my personal price is, well, if I was getting 500 for waging 50, then it would be worth it, right? So I think the moment I'm making a prediction on Cauldron, I am actually engaging in that probabilistic reasoning and making that judgment call. But I think if there's like a 10% probability of this happening, then it's worth it only if I win like, I don't know, 1,000 reputation points. But if there's a 90% chance of it happening, then it doesn't really matter how much I win. I'll win something, I'm fairly sure it's going to happen. So it's almost like gamifying that and gambling. I think it's a healthy form of addiction to gambling. Because it's not money, okay? It's my reputation. It's a virtual number of points. It's not real money. We're not advocating gambling. Can I ask a follow-up question then? Was that? I mean, I thought it was a joke, but do you think it is a healthy way of doing it, or is there a risk? Is it a slippery slope?
I think it's a good way of engaging people. I think you don't want to get down the road of a whole bunch of people kind of gambling in the future and you fall into these, you can get people addicted to these sorts of activities if you're not careful. So it's really just as an exercise. But I also with this prediction, what is key is that you actually have a strong corpus of data behind your predictions, not just about what will happen in the future, but it's actually about what happened in the past. So in a sense, you're asking people to engage with historical data, and they might not even know about any historical data. But the key thing that would be useful for financial literacy and so on is to look at what's happened when people have made policymakers have made certain decisions, and what were the consequences. For example, Donald Trump's tariffs, looking back at what happened the last time this happened, which people would know about, but it'd be hard to predict, and then they might be able to look back and actually the systems of, well, this is what happened last time, and this is actually what's happening now. So you might want to reflect on that when making predictions. And the same thing is with Rachel Reeves' decision to raise national insurance alongside the minimum wage when seeking to promote the economy. It was counterproductive, it had the opposite effect, it was predictable, and it was predictable based on previous evidence of what happened when you do this. So our policymakers need to have something like this. Even if it's a game for their induction set, they need to have these tools, and I would be surprised, and I am constantly surprised when they're not using better use of predictive technologies and using that as part of policy debates for making decisions, because we know usually that patterns reoccur. So I think that's really what I'd say that the gambling, it was a bit of a joke, but you could see that people got locked in, and we saw similar things happening with Wikipedia editing and crowdsourcing. There were some people that suddenly retreated into their bedrooms and were never seen again because they were constantly looking for stars, or because they wanted to be top of the leaderboard. So there is a little risk there, but obvious. But I would just say, just on that point that James raised, there has been an announcement yesterday of changes to the national curriculum in England, and probably coming in Scotland, that will introduce more emphasis on assessing misinformation and becoming more financially literate, and all of these things for which your technology, if you calibrate it correctly, would be perfectly placed.
It's about the platform because it seems very basic. I didn't use it, but are you collecting any profile information about the users using it?
No, we collect, and my question to you was going to be related, but we collect obviously their name, we don't collect, they enter it, we have it, and we see how often we store all their predictions. But that's about it. Did you mean preferences?
Preferences or whatever information giving you access to whatever application we have, anything on the phone. I'm just saying because it would be very interesting to predict, not to do them doing the prediction, but actually predicting who is going to predict correctly. And you can find that pattern there. I'm expecting probably because everything I studied there is a pattern in that. You can predict who's going to predict it correctly, and you have a score based on their right prediction, not just because the end is correct or not, but actually from their profile you can associate. So if someone came new for you, you can profile them based on the correctness of the prediction that is going to happen.
Predicting their prediction accuracy. Well, I mean, that, it looks like education status.
Yes.
A lot of these services you see constantly trying to get you to do an IQ test, for example, so they can say how much you belong.
Get access to the cookies, it will be enough.
We have seen though the people who are predicting more accurately, aka they're rising up on the leaderboard, they do tend to come and change their predictions, and that's what's driving their accuracy up. And some users, when I talk to them, they ask me, they seem very favored. One of them, I remember putting courses around in London together, and they like, oh, but it feels like cheating, me being able to update my prediction and change my opinion. And at Cauldron, we very much believe, just like in real life, you're allowed to change your opinion based on as things change. So why not change your prediction? And if that's saving you your stake reputation, then all the better. But it is how much reputation you will have is a function of risk and time. So if you're changing your prediction closer to the event occurring, then we will not reward you a lot more in your you stay plus reward, because you're not cheating, but you're
You've gone and done more research, so you're actually, because you're intrigued by this question, or what if the other people are predicting, made you think, I better find out, maybe I was wrong. So it's not just her behavior that drives these things, but it may actually be self-reflection and research.
oh, should we reward it more?
That might be actually a negative effect because it would say that changing your opinion is useful all the time. So people keep changing positive, negative, positive, feel free. So probably it might actually lead to a wrong.
It's without a context.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we changing?
Exactly.
Well, I was wondering if you could see whether people actually had domains of expertise and either stuck to that, and that's where it's like a safe bet, versus actually I just answered whatever is today's one, I'll just do it, and whether the patterns are going to be quite different.
No, people actually, it's not always, so for context, if you haven't already used Cauldron, there is a prediction of the day every day at 8 a.m. Usually, or 12 p.m. you get what the question of the day today is. A bit like play on radio, but for global affairs, and you just predict, you think quickly, and you move on. But we see most of the times users do not go and predict the question of the day actually when they're prompted. They go and look for other questions they're interested in, and they predict them. I haven't figured out why, because the question of the day is very prominently at the top of the screen. And yeah.
It might be a confidence thing because if you've got limited number of things to gamble if you go into that. And so again, it's a sort of gambling issue of, I think that's more likely, I know more about football, I'll put that in this, that resource angle as well.
I have a question for you, Robin, actually. It's related to this. Some people want, and we see this a lot from our user interviews. Some users have asked us, can we have preferences? Can you show me things that I want to be shown? But also I have some users who like RSS feeds. So they like curating, but they don't want algorithms to just dictate what they're seeing, so they don't want that at all. So my question for you, Robin, is exactly that. Like, some people want algorithms to learn their tastes and curate. Others want to build their own feed to avoid being steered. From a cognition point of view, what happens when you outsource judgment to recommendation? And are we losing evaluative skill, or are we just shifting where we use it?
So, recommender systems are tend to be more for reinforcement in that way anymore. I guess I don't see it as a reduction in evaluation, but more in the perspective and opportunity. That's the word. So, recommender systems, for example, do a really great job of what they're meant to do. So they just, give you more of what you're wanting. They can suggest like 5 books that you'd enjoy reading based on your previous sort of purchases or whatever. And usually start with this sort of, based on your previous purchases, we recommend blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what you're getting is, yes, safe bets, okay, back to bets or something, but what you don't then know is what other suitable options there might have been, what other perspectives there were. So as long as you're wanting more of the same, great. If you're trying to expand your knowledge and views, that's when it's difficult. Okay. And now also many suggestions come with that little bit, say actually this is a sponsored one. So actually the influence is being paid for it as well. So always be aware of what actually you're absorbing. The reasons why you're seeing it as well. So there's a bias from the provider that combines with the bias that you've got to create an immense generally, so they're fine for mundane things, like which sandwich you would choose from Basics or something. Again, risk evaluation for other things, be more skeptical. They will save you time, that can be a good thing. Fine, as I say, for things that don't matter. Use that saved cognitive energy in reserve for the important things. I think that's probably my message.
A follow-up on that, from a design perspective and design mathematics perspective, what's one UX choice you would make that keeps metacognition on while still keeping curation? Letting curation help.
Yeah, so I probably will get detail for this sort of thing. But what people see is that annoying little pop-up confirmation box. It's actually a good thing. So, are you sure you want to say this? Are you sure you want to do that? To force you to be less impulsive, less sort of rage-driven, sort of like, to just pause and reflect just a little bit. It doesn't have to be for long, but just that second click to yes, just to make sure. So it's something as simple as that. There have been studies that have tried to encourage people to do that by having sort of set of 3 questions before the second part. Just, are you sure you're going to do a checklist? That's maybe a bit much, but anything that just stops that instant sort of thing is worth thinking about. Even if you think it's slightly annoying, it works.
That's very interesting. I've got lots of follow-up questions, but we will stay here all night if I start asking them. I is for Walid. What have you learned from online communities about designing reflective rather than reactive? But building on to what Robin just said, reflective rather than reactive public spaces.
I think what I learned from research and studying social media in general and people behaving online is that we be hidden in patterns all the time. And it comes to the first thing about actually when we believe something, not believe something. Because we did a recent study with Björn about not fake news and detecting fake news, if you want to do that. We were checking actually who is spreading fake news and who is actually refuting it. And it was interesting that you can predict the people's behavior towards the fake news with 94% accuracy, with just their profile behavior and online behavior online. And it's interesting to see that you can do that for political biases, for even sports biases, and anything. And the main thing actually we always say, there is something in social science I learned from working there is it's called homophily. And homophily actually simply people who have similar interests or similar backgrounds or whatever, they come closer to each other. Which is natural. Maybe people from the same background, same race, the same religion, the same hobby, whatever it is, they come closer to each other. And when this group, there is a decision about a new topic, even if most of the people in this group are not aware of this topic, if small portion of them are enough to take a decision, everyone will just follow. Because this is actually peer pressure, social influence. And this is actually important. Even I learned in my life that when I need to make a decision, stop alone and think about it, away from any pressure outside. Because the social influence is real and everyone actually would like to go with the same group. And this is the main, I think, thing I learned. Many of my students, I can't predict anything about anyone from their social profile. We predicted stances, we predicted performances fake news and so on. We found, for example, and one of the interesting stuff, there is stance towards immigration, for example. In the US, where we studied this, and it turned out if you are against immigration, one of the strong signals in your profile is that you will be, and so of course you're following Trump and following Ted Cruz and these people, but on the other side, we found them actually a strong signal that most of them, they like sports like NHL, NFL, and NASCAR. Which was interesting how these are related, but when you check that, it's the same homophily. On the other side, people actually who are open to immigrants and actually are more more liberal, interesting signals in them, they actually are listening to music accounts like Agavella and EDM, and they listen a lot to Justin Bieber. So when we think about this, how this is related, somehow it's related, because when I speak to Americans, they tell me, oh yeah, because these kind of sports, NHL and NASCAR, are very popular in Texas, in the South. You are more Democrats, which would be, there are more Republicans, which kind of relates. So these signals are embedded in our life. We don't maybe pay attention, but it's there. So the interesting thing that I have learned from social media and people behavior online, we are clearly behaving in patterns, and you can probably, with some signals that we don't even think about it, probably we tell something about us, even if we don't explicitly say it. So we have this kind of three papers called predicting unspoken views. People didn't explicitly say anything about their views, but we can still predict it, based on actually their behaviors, their performance online, and so on.
Do you ever feel that it's just always struck me that as academics, you're dealing with sort of limited corpuses of data, and you're kind of restricted in your one area. You may have a lot of ethical positions around what you do, but the fact is, the advertising world has been aware of this and has used it with great deal of sophistication for a long time, and there are these large data
interests you have. If you have any children, you haven't told Instagram that. It's mindfulness, other information, and it's feeding you information or things that it might want to catch your eyeballs or sell you advertising with, based on those profiles. So they are enormously sophisticated. And I think with now advertising inbuilt into social media, like Meta, which is now WhatsApp as well, harvesting some of our private information, with pseudo anonymization. We've got Twitter now moving on to commercialization. It's turned into basically a TikTok, kind of TikTok. Those private moments are being turned into this data order for this prediction. So I think we really are, even as academics, really only touching the surface when we think of the level of power and sophistication, compute power, manpower, financial power, platform power, data center power, and now the AI's on top. We've even got, Sam Altman, predictably, you could have said, going from supposedly a public interest non-profit into a commercialized tool, and ChatGPT and so on combined. So really, we're in tough times. So those developing these critical skills and offline interactive capabilities.
I totally agree. Actually, the stuff I mentioned is based on public, which is simply who you're following, who you're tweeting for, what you're saying. But these platforms, they know actually which videos you watched, which ones you skipped, which posts you started typing and then decided to delete it later. What are you doing when you need to input on Chrome? Everything. So probably when we're saying my work is always saying getting 90% predictions or 95% predictions, so probably you're getting 105% predictions. So they probably know more about you than you know about yourself. And I had Lucia, she was working with me, like she graduated about 4 years ago. She was doing predicting depression on social media, and it turned out still doable as well. So if you have depression, and it was interesting, we found actually the happy songs are a good predictor for depression, which was unlike what we thought about. So this kind of, imagine all this information, and we have this sample of data, we have all the data, horizontally and vertically, so they know more people and more information about them. So they have the amount of data available they have and the access to it they have, they can predict all those things. So we have to be aware of this. How to fight it's really hard, but at least be aware that they know everything about you.
It's not to scare anyone, and I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist or seem like one, but I have noticed, and I'm not sure if other people have, when I think about something and not talk to anyone, I do, my feeds change, and my feeds are sort of showing me what I was thinking about. Maybe I'm unconsciously typing it somewhere, and it's getting it from somewhere else. I don't know if you've done any work on that.
We don't have a proof of this. Yes, we notice it, but maybe if you talk about things, you search it for it, and the cookies again. Look at the cookies.
Yeah.
People are organized. So you can send the data to the API, you can get all the money. So actually, it was interesting because one of the most active, for example, used the app for used by Muslims called Muslim Pro, and it's actually an application that tells you the prayer times, if we are looking for halal food and so on. And it has been used, and actually it turned out 5 years ago, a scandal came out that they were selling the data for FBI and CIA in the US. And it's turned out to be a French company, and they are doing the data. So people, and that's was before GDPR thing. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but they still actually run it. So this is the thing, that's our data is out there, and the trust again, you have to think about it. Now in the last couple of years, where the last big tech are actually participating with governments in killing people and helping them with these kind of things. So how do you build the trust, especially these essential technologies that are there and we're using them, we cannot build it up. So it's a big problem, to be honest. They don't have a solution.
And because having a platform that lets you potentially get enough data participation, you can at least have you can create potentially, well, just like opinion pollsters and so on do, you're creating a public forum where those kinds of opinions and predictions and so on in the mass are evidence
they get somebody to put out a rumour that they're going to raise tax by double, for example, or that they're going to cut this benefit, or they're going to invade that country. And they just wait, they see how the public responds, because ultimately if the public goes against it, they probably will get voted out. They don't want that. But also they might realise they've gone too far, so they don't do that thing, they might do the next thing down. We've seen that quite a lot lately, and so these platforms kind of are being used already, but at least with something like this, you could have a consented platform where people have a chance to do this themselves on data that's not explicitly connected to a marketing company or to a government body, and actually see how it works out. And certainly the issue is to be then tempted to sell that data, because that is going to be part of the business plan. So this is, you will need to start thinking about your ethical plan right now, because the opportunities may be too tempting.
Things that keep me up at night.
What is your price?
Is that a question?
How much would it be
How much would it
to sell all that
I'm
information?
not good with it, generally. We do very transparently, we do talk with local magazines these days where we want to partner with them to engage local communities so we can see specifically younger people. So we can see, I live in happening in London, and so we can see whether this bit of the canal should be opened up again by looking into what they're predicting, or can we re-engage them into local policy and national policy and global policy by making them make these predictions. And can we actually, this is a question and I don't know the answer to it, can we explore this with policymakers and help them understand what people want through this data? I haven't looked into selling it to marketing. Not marketing people, which wouldn't want to, but yeah.
There are people here working on deliberative democracy, how to communicate that
Yeah.
and get ideas.
You should talk to me afterwards.
I guess it's just useful to remind ourselves that so many of these social media companies are really advertising companies. So they're collecting all this data, they're designing the system so that we spend as much time as possible, and so they can find out a lot about us, so they can sell the data or show us adverts, and that's where they get their income from. So maybe this is an opportunity to build a company that gets people to engage with the news, where the foundation isn't collecting as much data as possible of the users to then sell it to show them adverts, but something else. Because if you can find a way to harness that power of the crowd to actually predict the future, if you can predict what's going to happen in a year or two or 5, that's a really valuable thing to be able to do. And that doesn't rely on you selling user data so they can be shown hyper-personalized adverts. It's a completely different source of income. So it's designing a social platform and building it maybe on a different business model. I think that's a really exciting prospect.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, the social media, the biggest thing was that retweet button. Because people still respond to word of mouth. Despite you knowing everything, if a recommendation comes from someone you know and trust, it will work better. So getting you to redistribute their information on their behalf to people that that's the big thing. Yeah.
You should. I went to a talk recently. It was on social media, and it was done in LSE in London. And the professor, they talked about how. Well, I mean, these are all for-profit companies, and the biggest challenge for me right now at Cauldron is how do we be a for-profit company, but also do well and also do things ethically, but also be able to feed ourselves, and the world is, don't want to be philosophical, but it's there's an imbalance in the way that it's easier to do the quote-unquote wrong thing and sell all the data, but is there a way a for-profit company can figure out a way to do it the right way, the non-controversial way.
Fairness and transparency. And that's like, it's not, people don't sort of reject the fact that you can benefit from it as well. It has to be clear and honest in a way.
I think, what was the time? Okay, I think we should open up the floor to the audience, and yeah, we've been going on for a bit. I've got lots more questions. That's been so interesting. So really, I'd like to invite you to ask us questions. Any questions?
I've got a question.
Yes.
Well, the question triggered right at the start. Years ago, I read a book by Daniel Kahneman, saying Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, about activation and response. If we, as the audience, took ourselves back 50 years and imagined the amount of quantum of information our grandparents were asked to absorb on a daily basis compared to what we are asked to absorb nowadays, and in relation to the conversation about social media, as I understand it and as I observe, is built to activate dopamine. And dopamine is the thing that interferes with us. It arrests our ability to pause and reflect on the information and response, retreat, like, heart, etc., without any thought behind it. How do we slow ourselves down so that we get back to that state 50 years ago when we might absorb a piece of information, say in a newspaper, and then choose to sit back and propose and write a letter which is thoughts related and rational response rather than that instant emotional response that you get when you're just engaging I think in the Olympic system, the emotional response without the rational response that you really need to come to an informed decision about anything. So I don't know, does that come across as a question or I'm not too sure.
WHO's definition of the infodemic was not just it's around misinformation and disinformation, it's about a surfeit of information and actually trying to make sense of it. But mental hygiene, I think just finding a quality source, again, you used to be able to get curated content, expert created content on platforms like what is now X, but that's all been removed through the financialization of participation and the deliberate move to not just advertising, but also Elon Musk's philosophy that you have to see both sides all the time. So you're not actually able to build those communities that curate news and in a useful way, which is why we're all getting more dependent on things like ChatGPT. But you'll see, your key, we have to encourage, find new ways to encourage and platforms for people to use to support quality information. Now, we all choose those quality sources differently. I traditionally went to the broadsheet newspapers and BBC, but now even the BBC has become very much clickbait, very much 24-hour news drive, and this is our problem. The dopamine hit that comes from being addicted to, I'm a victim, 24-hour news cycles, always looking for something new, and also the bad news is often the most exciting, or the disaster that's happened, or the travesty that's just taken place, or something we get angry about. So I think we need to have if we want to have a healthy population, mentally healthy population, cognitively healthy healthy population, that are going to make good decisions, then we need to be rethinking those news sources and actually going back on some of the convenience, mass flooding of information that we get constantly. Our options for that, again, change a lot, and it's quite hard as technology moves to make a decision about where to settle. And as I said before, it was the broadsheets, although they were filtered obviously by editors and some of them were conflicted. Then we have international comparisons of different news media and some, and then Corruption International and so on, Corruption Watch I think it's called. And others have looked at the impartiality of different news sources, so you can go to the ones that are more impartial, but we know they're not always completely impartial. And then you're now moving on to, we've got things like ChatGPT now. We're going to talk about this. This is quite an interesting one. I'm increasingly going to ChatGPT when I want to unravel something, I want to get to the root of the matter quickly. I'm just getting a paragraph from some news source or some social media, BBC kind of news app, and I want to know more. But the key with these technologies is asking critical questions in the appropriate sequence, rather than just saying, tell me is this guy a fraudster, or is this guy going to win, or is that new technology going to bomb, or is this stock going to fly? It's too simplistic, and you will end up with just a simplistic response, usually with some garbage added in. The secret of these technologies is unfolding levels of knowledge and always asking for the trustworthy sources, ensuring that there are prompts that you can use to ensure that the unfolding questions you receive when you want to get a richer answer are being drawn from more trustworthy sources rather than less trustworthy sources. They're not random. And that creates other questions that we have at the moment. Is around the continuation of digital social inequality. We see already the digital divide, whereby those who have more education and more health and all these things probably have more money and more ability to use technology, and therefore more chance of benefiting from the advantages that technology can bring. So, it should be a democratizing and unifying source, but actually it's augmenting some of those existing divides. And I think we're seeing the same thing with some of the AI, because the more, if you've been through a graduate education where you've been forced to critically analyze things, never accept the first answer, where your language skills are very good, where you probably can say this to give context to those questions, you're going to get better, more informed, more reliable and reasonable and truthful and useful answers from an AI than if you went into a completely cold and naive. So, they are levelers to some extent. You can say, tell me like I was a 5-year-old, so it can actually unpick very complex topics in a way that helps you to onboard and then build up. So it has a democratizing element when it comes to news and politics and all these things. But we must be mindful of the fact that it's going to be most useful for the people who are already the most informed. And this is going to be our challenge. But nonetheless, potentially a way of grabbing, synthesizing and making interpretable and summarizing key information that allows us to avoid having to speak to the crowd or do the research. Now, at the point where we give up our own critical skills and devolve them to the system, that's when we are in trouble, because they can be misused or manipulated by others. But at the moment, it does have its advantages. It's not an easy thing to answer.
I can share my opinion. It's not my research. The problem at the moment in this world that we are driven by money, whatever makes money. And if you need to have something to put quality, the objective quality of money again, I think this is the job of the governments, to put something. For example, you know that recently the UK said actually that there should be a verification to visit food websites, and this actually made the drop by more than 77% drop from the UK. So it came by the government. The problem actually, if you check by the crowd, just the wisdom of the crowd, it's useful in some applications, but when you check actually, what are the top seen videos on YouTube? They are not podcasts, they are not lectures, they are some songs, random songs people to run around it. What is the most profitable company in the world that generates a profit per employee? It's OnlyFans. ChatGPT came out to say we will find you to the cancer. They announced a month ago we actually have broken ChatGPT. We are driven by money. The qualities, the values, keep it aside. We need money. Unless governments come out and put regulations, you will not stop this. Because by far, you have seen it. If you left it just like this, people will go for the look. What is it? Because it's just have fun. This is actually not what we are seeing. So unless it's not our job, we'll try to make research to show what's going on. But at the end, it should be a government come and say this should stop. There should be regulation of this. Like when the European came saying we put GDPR to actually control how the data is used, it was a good thing. But at the end, it should come from authorities. But we have actually a problem here. That most of the governments, they have actually are supported by billionaires who actually have these companies in the back. So it's a loop. It has been broken a little bit in the New York City yesterday, which regardless you like this guy or not, at the end, it was a defeat for the billionaires. So, but it's not the common thing. At the end, these billionaires will push money to bring the people who will put policies that at the end will actually end up profiting them. And with no qualities, and this is my opinion, I'm sorry if I may totally disagree with me, with no qualities that control us, this will be the situation forever and will keep getting worse. And I really feel sorry for the new generations, because we had some times before this. The new generations, all of these challenges, we had the time where we were actually looking at books. The new generations with social media, TikTok, doing the challenges, use these challenges. So where are you learning your qualities? How are you building yourself? How are you going to change the world? We need
a movement towards slow thinking again, in the sense of the words of Daniel Kahneman. We need to be slow thinking, critical thinking, getting off the platforms, because we are facing people that don't think it's interesting, even for those of us who are not Gen Z or Gen X. I don't know what Gen I am. I really would like to admit what Gen I am. But I am using social media now. I signed up for Instagram not long ago, and I find myself hypnotized by this thing. Hours are lost. Some in specific interests. I'm interested in art, for example. There's a lot of particular art interest in there. But one is constantly bombarded by tempting advertisements, constantly turning them off. But likewise with X, is being turned into this dopamine factory. And even as I say, these conventionally reliable news sources are also turning into dopamine factories. It started with the USA, the 24-hour news cycle, and the O.J. Simpson chase, and now we have it constantly. Oh, what's happened in the latest government scandal, or this plane crash that was crashed 10 hours ago, it still crashed 9 hours ago. Hey, it hasn't really changed, but you want to know the latest in the story because your dopamine activators are on high alert. And it's dangerous for us, and also it's actually probably contributing to the productivity crisis. But how, I think it's not the answer by a system like this, although that might indeed encourage critical thinking. But the big innovation is how to encourage slow thinking, how to encourage us to go back to books, how to think things through, how to spend time alone, and how to have youth work that is actually meaningful. And that is not easy as we all disappear into individualized social media consumption rooms.
So again, again, to add to the critical thinking, maybe slow thinking, but take advantage of Gen AI for what actually one of its main purposes was, as a conversational agent. So what you do is engage with it. You don't just get one answer and that's the search result over. Probe it, interrogate it. I genuinely find that almost more than 3/4 of my problems end up with incorrect answers. It needs a follow-up. It's an iterative process. Think about it, build it, and use what it offers for your own benefit in that way.
I think we need to start wrapping up, but I have one last question for all of you. Is there a prediction for a near-term event you're watching on or off Cauldron? On or off Cauldron? Is there a prediction of the near-term event you're watching on or off Cauldron?
Relating to tonight and the off Cauldron is that there won't be enough pizza.
There won't be enough pizza.
My son's at the back, so you're probably underestimating us.
Björn?
I made a really boring prediction today about the income tax rise in the budget. I said it wasn't going to rise. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, there's wishful thinking. So the danger is you predict the thing that you want to happen, another thing you actually think is going to happen. But then in a month you go back and you realize maybe I was wrong. You question my biases. That's the way forward.
I don't have much clear following the platform yet, but
Off the platform, in the news, in the world, in on social media, anything.
I don't know, so I would say a prediction. You say you want a prediction. Optimistic. I'm optimistic with the new generations. I feel that there is a hope. To be honest, when I see the new generations now, I know they are facing a lot of challenges than us, but I can see actually the new generations and how they think, and they just don't come to the trust about believing whatever is said to them will bring the thing that they're better than us. There is a deep hope there, and the hope in the future will be better.
That's really nice. Yes, we've got a prediction about the budget. It's coming up and it's Quantitative. But an optimistic one, and it's one of the prompts you gave us in the things around the use of AI for medical, first-line medical information and consultations. And I see it as actually going to be a very positive innovation for first-line questions, avoiding time wasting for the worried well, ensuring that if you're embarrassed about something or you are too busy, even you can at least ask the question. So we're going to stop so many people not consulting when they're genuinely ill because they didn't have time or were embarrassed, because they can at least break that first bit of social barrier and then follow it up with a human being. But we're also going to probably reduce the necessity for a lot of unnecessary consultations of primary care through this, and offer some reassurance of public health to people, mindful that there are going to be some glitches and phantom information in this AI, but I'm very optimistic about it and hope that it will come to fruition.
And Jane?
I think you wanted a quick one, so I'm just going to predict a white